Hope you all are fine, children. Today we are going to do grade 9 history, a first term lesson. It is British power in Sri Lanka. This is the third part of that lesson. From this lesson, we can learn the economic development that took place under the British rule. Before the British started plantation, here existed a rural agriculture-based economy or self-sufficient economic system. In this system, the food required for the village was produced in the village itself. What is that system? Self-sufficient system. The key fields were highland cultivation, wetland cultivation, or else Cinchona cultivation and paddy cultivation, and also animal husbandry. British wanted to get the maximum use of the resources available in the country. So, to increase the income, British started to cultivate of commercial crops or estate plantation. As recommendations of the Colebrook Commission had been implemented since 1833, the background required for the development of this plantation sector was created. So, let's see what are those recommendations of the Colebrook Commission which resulted in the plantation sector. First one is implementing a policy of selling state lands. Then, it provides the opportunity for local as well as foreign private entrepreneurs to buy lands. Formulation of policies to suit the objectives of the private entrepreneurs. Colebrook recommendations to cut down government expenditure. The government departments were closed down and some of them were merged in order to cut down expenses on administration. Number of civil servants was reduced and reduced their salaries also. The upcountry and the low country was merged to reduce the administrative expenses. To obtain the required lands for the estates, the traditional lands of the villagers in the upcountry areas to which there had been no legal documents to prove their ownership were acquired by the government under the Lands Act of 1840. Under what? Under the Lands Act of 1840. Through this act, both local and foreign planters got the opportunity to buy lands in this country at very low prices. Formulating policies to be in line with the objectives of private businesses. First one, providing opportunity for the European business community to represent the Legislative Council. Next, ending the monopoly, the government had to sell items such as cinnamon and salt. Implementing the judicial reforms of Cameron. Taking measures to establish a savings bank. Abolishing the compulsory labor service system. Can you smell it? What is it? Yes, coffee. So, we are going to learn about coffee. Coffee is the first cash crop that was cultivated in this country under the British rule. But before the arrival of British, coffee had been grown as a garden crop, not as a commercial crop. George Bird He cultivated a coffee estate for the first time in the history of Sri Lanka in 1822. Who cultivated a coffee estate for the first time in Sri Lanka? Yes, very good. George Bird. He cultivated the first estate in Singhapitiya, Gampola. Later, Governor Edward Barnes, he cultivated a coffee estate in one of his private lands in Gannoruwa. By about year 1848, the coffee cultivation areas had exceeded 60,000 acres. Let's see what are the reasons for the development of coffee cultivation in Sri Lanka. Drinking coffee had become popular in European countries. So, the demand for coffee increased and automatically a big profit could be earned through this coffee cultivation. Next reason is coffee of very high quality could be produced in Sri Lanka at a low cost. And a large number of entrepreneurs took to coffee cultivation after the implementation of the Colebrook reforms. And also the duty which was imposed on coffee that was exported to England from this country was reduced. But this coffee cultivation began to decline. What are the reasons? Coffee was exported to the European market from Southeast Asian countries such as Java. So the demand that had been there for the coffee exported from Sri Lanka was dropped. The world economic crisis that took place in 1848 had an adverse impact on coffee trade. Large extents of coffee cultivations were destroyed as those cultivations had caught a fungal disease called Hemilia vastrix since 1869. You can see some coffee plants which this fungal disease was there. After the coffee cultivation, the planters started to cultivate Cinchona. Cinchona? What is Cinchona? Have you heard about Cinchona? Cinchona is a herbal plant. It is used to manufacture a medicine called quinine. It is used to treat malaria patients. But the demand for the Cinchona in the world market declined. So they couldn't generate long-term profits. So the planters gave up cultivating Cinchona. After the coffee cultivation, the people started to cultivate cocoa also. But it was not successful as it was very costly to cultivate cocoa, and also cocoa could be cultivated only in a very limited area of the country. Cocoa. For what they use cocoa? Yes, to manufacture chocolate. Do you like to eat chocolate? Okay, so you should learn more about cocoa. It's time for a tea break. Very tasty. Shall we learn about tea? Okay, here we go. In about 1873, James Taylor tested the growing tea plants in Sri Lanka, in Lul Kandura estate. It achieved a massive progress by year 1890. Reasons to become tea as the most prominent export economic crop. The climatic conditions in Sri Lanka was highly suitable for tea cultivation, especially in wet zone. And a high demand was there for the Sri Lankan tea in the London market. Not only that, and in the world market. The railway tracks and the road system was developed. So, because of that, the tea cultivation also developed. The labourers who required for tea cultivation could be obtained easily and cheaply. Why? Because labourers could be brought to this country from South India. High profits could be generated at a low production cost. These are the reasons. Coconut is an essential thing for our day-to-day life. So, let's learn something about this coconut cultivation. Coconut had been grown in this country since ancient times, but it had not been cultivated as an export crop. Coconut cultivation was developed as an export crop during the British rule. By year 1910, coconut cultivation had expanded in about 850,000 acres, centered around Kurunegala, Gampaha and Chilau. Most of the coconut estate owners were local businessmen. Coconut had been grown in this country since ancient times, but it was not cultivated as an export crop. However, the coconut cultivation was developed as an export crop during the British rule. By year 1910, coconut cultivation had expanded in about 850,000 acres, centered around Kurunegala, Chilau, Gampaha. Most of the coconut estates owners were local businessmen. The coconut produced in this country was exported in the forms of coconut oil, copra and poonek. The Coconut Research Institute was established in Lunuvilla for the development of coconut cultivation. The coconut produced in this country was exported in the forms of coconut oil, copra and poonek. A Coconut Research Institute was established in Lunuvilla for the development of coconut cultivation. Rubber cultivation. Now we are going to learn about rubber cultivation. A few rubber plants that had been planted in the Kew Garden in England, they were brought to this country and they were planted in Peradeniya and Henaradgoda Botanical Gardens. Where? In Peradeniya and Henaradgoda Botanical Gardens. In which year? In 1877. Then, some planters gave up cinnamon cultivation and planted rubber in those lands. Factors that led to the development of rubber cultivation. A big demand for the rubber produced in Sri Lanka was there in USA. And also the price of rubber in the world market increased after the World War I. The automobile industry in Europe was developed and the demand for rubber increased. The soil and the climatic conditions of our country were very suitable for rubber cultivation. Because of the recommendations of Colebrook Commission, the establishment of an estate economy in this country, the local agriculture was subjected to a serious decline. Let's see what are the main factors that caused the collapse of local agriculture. First one is Land Act, which was introduced in 1840. Lands Act, what is it? According to this Land Act, land use system that had existed in this country, there had been no legal documents pertaining to the ownership of lands according to our land system. So, a large number of agricultural lands were acquired by the government according to this Lands Act, because the lands which there had been no legal documents pertaining to the ownership of lands were acquired by the government. So because of that, it resulted to the collapse of the local agriculture. Next, the government neglected the maintenance of tanks and irrigation systems of this country. It was very essential for the agriculture, these tanks and irrigation systems. So, because of this, the government neglected these maintenance of tanks and irrigation systems. The local agriculture collapsed. Then, as a result of the government policy of selling lands, local and foreign businessmen bought the traditional lands in the upcountry and the low country, and those lands were utilized for making estates. Local planters also started this estate cultivation. After the natural forests in the upcountry had been cleared and estate cultivations had been started, natural water resources dried up and agricultural lands in the low country were faced with the threat of destruction. Compulsory labor service, it was abolished, which the village council had obtained labor required for the maintenance of rural irrigation systems. So it was abolished. And it resulted agricultural activities could not be continued. Let's see what are the efforts of the British at developing the local agriculture. Governor Henry Ward. He appointed a committee in 1855 to look into the condition of irrigation works. He renovated the Irakkamam tank and Ampara tank in the eastern province and Kirama tank and Urubokka tank in southern province. Governor Hercules Robinson appointed a commission to look into the conditions of irrigation works and renovated Tissa Maharama Weber. Governor William Gregory, he renovated a number of tanks. Examples: Basavakkulama Weber, Tissa Weber, Maha Weber in Medavachiya, Kala Weber and Kantale Weber. Governor Arthur Gordon, he renovated 42 tanks and he renovated irrigation works connected to River Walave and Udukiri Wala. The Department of Irrigation was established by the Governor West Ridgeway in 1900. The officers were recruited who had knowledge about the irrigation sector. They maintained the irrigation systems. Governor McCallum in 1911 founded the cooperative society movement for ensuring the well-being and welfare of farmers' communities. Let's see what are the objectives of creating this movement. Providing loans to farmers at low rates of interest, reducing the debt burden of farmers and strengthening their economy, improving the welfare of the farmer communities in the country, developing the rural economy by way of strengthening the cooperative movement. According to the Donamo reforms of 1931, Sri Lankan ministers were appointed to a number of ministries, including the Ministry of Agriculture. As universal franchise was introduced under the Donamo Constitution, politicians had to pay more attention to the needs of the rural people of the country. So, the further steps were taken to develop the agriculture. Launching a movement to establish farmer colonies in the dry zone by D.S. Senanayaka during the period when State Council was in effect is an example for this. So children, can you remember what did we learn through this lesson? Let's see. We learned some recommendations of the Colebrook Commission which resulted in the plantation sector and the development of the estate plantation, development of the local agriculture, efforts of the British at developing the local agriculture, and at last we learnt about the establishment of cooperative societies. Children, now you can do the activity 4 in page number 51, activity 5 in page number 52 and activity 6 in page number 54. My dear children, let's meet from the next video. So goodbye children.